Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Thursday lunchtime lecture from us here at the church's Conservation Trust. It really is fantastic to be talking to you all and to be welcoming all of our friends and supporters back for another weekly lecture. As is always the case with these lectures, we start at 12:50 and we do what we call Church of the Week, where we talk about one of the churches in our collection of 356 historic churches. So without any delay, I'm going to pass you over to our Chief Executive, Peter Ayres, who's going to tell you which church we have chosen this week and give you a bit of a behind-the-scenes tour.
Thank you very much, George, and welcome to you all those early birds who've come in before. Now, this week's Church of the Week is actually not St. Lawrence, Little Stanmore, because that's still a parish church, but attached to St. Lawrence, Little Stanmore is the Chandos Mausoleum, which is owned by the CCT. And I'd just like to say that we're very grateful to Ecclesiastical Insurance for sponsoring this lecture series as well, as you can see from our little logo down in the corner. Now, the Church of Little Stanmore, St. Lawrence Little Stanmore, is unique among parish churches in this country, retaining nearly all its original woodwork, and with its original paintings, the interior differs little from what must have been when it was fresh and new in the early 18th century. I'm going to have a bit of trouble, changing slides. I have to stop sharing. Sorry about this. We're just going to keep moving on. A normal service will return, I'm sure. Sorry about this. So the style is not the English Baroque of Sir Christopher Wren, but the dramatic Baroque of continental Europe. Characteristic Baroque features are the imitation sky in the retro choir behind the altar, lit by a concealed window, the trompe statues with their dramatic proses, and the painted scenes covering the walls and ceilings. But the church is not entirely vested with us because we only collect, as I said before, the Chandos Mausoleum itself. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about this because I am having a bit of trouble with the slides as they move through today. I'll see if I can do something about that because it's quite annoying. I'm going to just do this instead. You might get a different view here. Can you still see that okay? Anyway, I'll carry on. The church was largely rebuilt by the first Duke of Chandos, who employed many artists, including George Frederick Handel, who no doubt would have conducted music at the church as a composer in residence to the Duke. The lavish Chandos Mausoleum was added to the church in 1736 to be a mausoleum for the first Duke, whose monument you can't see in front of you, but you will be able to see in front of you when we sort the slides out. This monument was crafted by the master carver Grinling Gibbons. The Duke is shown in a wig, dressed as a Roman citizen. This figure is flanked by plain pilasters outside, which are the kneeling figures of two of his wives, Mary Lake and Cassandra Willoughby. The walls and ceiling of the mausoleum are lavishly decorated with a rare and remarkable example of 18th century illusionistic wall paintings in an English parish church by artist Gaetano Brunetti to complement the tomb of the first Duke of Chandos. Like the church itself, the interior of the mausoleum is decorated with wall paintings which feature trompe-l'oeil effects. The ceiling is painted with a miniature copy of the dome of the Pantheon, sorry, not the Parthenon, it was always the one you get that wrong, the Pantheon in Rome. Brunetti was an Italian painter. We don't know exactly when he was born, but he was a Lombard architectural painter. He came to England in 1731, where he designed ornamental prints and carried out design work. He moved to Paris in 1739, where he died in 1758. And I'm now going to try and stop sharing my screen. So apologies for that appalling presentation by me. As always, we're experimenting with new things each week, and I got the screens completely mixed up for my PowerPoint presentation. But I hope you enjoy that. It's really worth a visit if you go to Little Stanmore to see the mausoleum, which is literally off the main body of the church. And the church, as I said before, is still an active parish church today. Over to you, George.
Thank you ever so much, Peter. And before we go into question time with our Chief Executive, I see there's quite a few spammers on today, so I can only apologise for that. We are keeping an eye on it. We are banning people from our page as soon as they spam. So please don't click any of those links. Everyone, our lectures are always free of charge for you to watch and enjoy. As always, though, this is your time, an opportunity to ask our Chief Executive whatever questions you would like. So you can do that by commenting, or you can send us an email to digital@thecct.org.uk. But if we don't have time to do your question today, we'll put it in and we'll do it next week. So one of the questions, Peter, that's come in is, what are our plans for reopening churches and allowing the general public to go and visit our churches again?
Well, all of our plans depend on the timetable set by the government. Now, what we've managed to do during all of the lockdowns is keep our churches, on the whole, open for what's known as individual prayer. So many of our churches, the vast majority of them, actually have their doors open for local people to go in. But we're really looking forward to being able to welcome more people back again. And the dates will follow as the timetable follows for the government. So we're aiming on getting them more open during April, and then definitely when we go into getting our offices open finally in June as well. So keep an eye on our website, because as soon as the process works through, and if the government agree to the steps that there are for reopening, our sites will be reopened as you can get further afield. But do look locally where you are if you're in England, because you might be able to go and see our sites anyway, and we're really looking forward to inviting people back in. And when you go, don't forget well, you'll be able to sign the visitor books again, which is great news. So we'll be able to see that you've been there. But also, please don't forget to donate if you go, and to save you having to take cash with you, you can text your donation in every single church that we've got. We can't wait to have some events there as well, and hopefully later in the year those will be coming through, and there'll be more detail. But the thing to do is keep an eye on our website, which will give you all the information you need to know about visiting.
Thanks, Peter. And a question that has been submitted today. The Church of England appointed Bishop Graham Usher to take the lead on environmental issues. What plans does the CCT have, for example, to reduce its net carbon footprint?
Oh, that's a good question. Now, we've been thinking about what we need to do in terms of this for some time, and we've just been doing some work on how we're going to do that. At the moment, we're just establishing our baseline carbon output at the moment, which is important because you can't improve unless you know exactly what your output is. So we're just in the process of working that out. It's quite tricky to do, but we're not shy of doing that. So we'll be working out our baseline, and that will hopefully reveal to us where our biggest carbon outputs are. Now, there's some pretty obvious things, like a lot of our staff use cars to travel around because our churches are in remote rural places. So how best do we get them to travel around? But also, it's worth bearing in mind that there's a great deal of embedded carbon in our church buildings, because these buildings have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And hopefully also we have a collection of fantastic churchyards as well, and to see how the biodiversity there can sort of offset some of those carbon issues as well. But we're going to be thinking very hard about how we behave, or we do already, but we're going to think even harder with some evidence about how we behave and what we do at work and how we procure stuff as well. So I'm looking forward later in the year that we'll be able to give a bit more detail around that.
Thanks, Peter. And we're coming to the end of our allotted time for Church of the Week. But Peter, there was one thing we were going to talk about, and that was we said last week we had some exciting announcements to make, and I suppose that over to you. Did you want to make the announcement about what we're going to be doing?
Well, I think it's probably, well, I'd love to, George, but do you know what? You've put it all together, so why don't you let everybody know what's going to happen next?
Okay, thanks, Peter. So, everyone, we've really been blown away by the amount of support and love you have shown for us at the CCT. It's been a pleasure putting on these lectures, and I can confirm they're continuing. Our Thursday lunchtime lectures, we're planning way up until the end of this year. They're always going to be free of charge. But for those people who have become members with us, we're really excited because we're launching a secondary series of lectures which are exclusive to those people who become members. So our Thursday lunchtime lectures are still going to be running. They're still going to be free, but we're going to be doing extra lectures just as a thank you for those people who have become members with us. So later on, I'm going to be posting some links in the chat where you can find information about those upcoming lectures. We're starting them in May. They're going to be on the second Monday of the month. So our first lecture is in May, and that's with Dr. Helen Frisby on traditions of death and burial. And I suppose the other exciting announcement to make, which leads us quite nicely into our introduction, is we've got a brand new membership offer that we're launching today. So today we are joined by Dr. Richard Stemp, who's going to be talking to us about Giotto's wonderful, wonderful paintings in the Scrovegni Chapel. Now, Dr. Richard Stemp has written a phenomenal book, The Secret Language of Churches and Cathedrals, Decoding the Sacred Symbolism of Christianity's Holy Buildings. And in this book, you'll be really pleased to know, there are sections about the Scrovegni Chapel. So you've got some beautiful full-page illustrations, as well as some really handy guides and charts that show you how to decode them. It's got cathedrals from England, it's got churches, it's got liturgical objects. So if you join us by direct debit from just £3.50 per month, and if you use the offer code LECTURE, and that's lecture in capitals, you will get a free copy of this in return for you becoming a member of us. But as I said, you've got to join us by direct debit and use the offer code LECTURE, but we'll post some links in there below.
What I will say, George, is it is a fantastic book. I've really been enjoying looking through it. I've got my copy here as well. So it's been brilliant. And I think it's a really good offer for people joining us to get this completely free, which is great. So you can get this book as well as supporting the fantastic work of the Church's Conservation Trust. So we look forward to you joining soon.
Thanks, Peter. And yeah, and just to tag on to that, one of the reasons why we've chosen this book is that it's a really great introduction to churches. You'll find that a lot of the lectures that we've already done in the past are referenced in this book. So we kick-started this year off with a lecture about the mosaics at Ravenna. Those are mentioned in this book. Some of the wall painting lectures we've done before are in here about saints. It's all in this book. So it's a really great book that you will get for free if you become a member with us. Now, there are some other ways you can show your support to us. You can like these lectures, you can share them with your friends and family, but do make sure that you hit that like button and the follow button to get a prompt from us. Another announcement I should make is that in a few weeks, we're going to be, it won't make how you join the lecture, it will make it easier for you, but they will be on Facebook, but we'll also be able to be going live on YouTube simultaneously. So we'll be sharing details with that very shortly, but it'll be a bigger improvement, we hope, in the quality. And hopefully it will help us deal with some of the issues we're having with spammers. But as I said, these lectures are always free of charge. So please don't click any of the links that are being posted below. Finally, the other exciting news, and this is again, as a thank you, really, for people who have wanted to learn about churches and heritage that we look after at the CCT. Later on this year, we're going to be posting some member-exclusive video content. So there's going to be some really fantastic films, some mini documentary series that we're producing, and we've got some great people lined up who are going to be presenting those. We'll be sharing some details with you over the coming weeks and months once we go on to set and when we start producing these documentaries. But those will be available completely free of charge to our members. But as I said, we'll keep you updated on those. So I'm going to pass you over to Peter now, who's going to tell you a bit more about today's lecturer. So over to you, Peter.
Thanks, George. It does sound like the joining membership offer is getting better and better with what we can provide to give you in return for your generosity. So we're really pleased today to have Dr. Richard Stemp with us. He graduated from Clare College, Cambridge, with a degree in natural sciences and the history of art, and returned to complete his PhD on sculpture infra in the 15th century. After a year at the Academy of Live and Recorded Arts, he has shared his time between art and acting. He has lectured at the National Gallery for over 25 years and has also worked on regular basis at Tate Modern and Tate Britain, the Wallace Collection, Buckingham Palace and the V&A. As well as lecturing for numerous art societies around Britain, he also teaches on-site across Europe with Art History Abroad. His books include, of course, the great new membership offer that we've got of the Secret Language of Renaissance church and churches and cathedrals. And he has written and presented 2 series for Channel 4, Art in the National Gallery and Tate Modern, as well as making guest appearances on programmes as diverse as Terry Jones's Medieval Lives and CBBC's Exchange. Now, what you don't know about Dr. Stemp is that throughout Lent, he has been every day writing on one detail of a painting of scenes of the Passion by the Master of Delft. And he's got his numbers of the days of Lent right now, which I think he was a bit short to begin with, but he's worked that all through. So we're very lucky. He's stuck with it all the way through. So I'm sure he's looking forward to Easter Sunday, where he can have a well-deserved rest from all his labours. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Richard Stemp and thank him very much for doing this lecture for us today. Thank you, Richard.
Oh, thank you, Peter, and thank you, George. It's a great pleasure. And it's really lovely to be here for you today, with you today. And if you'd like to catch up on my Lent penance, then head to my website, the address at the bottom, www.drrichardstemp.com, and you can, on the homepage, there's a little link for Lent, and that'll take you to day 1. You can follow them through, or just put your email address in, and you'll get the last 2 plus the Easter post. Then I'll have a bit of a break. Anyway. This is just remarkable. I love this chapel. If you were in one of those balloon debates where you had to save one chapel in the entire world, I would save this one over the Sistine Chapel and the Michelangelo and all the other things, and over the Brancati Chapel with the Masaccio Masolino. It's truly remarkable. There's far too much to say. I'll probably overrun. I'm not going to apologise because it's all so wonderful. So this is it, the Scrovegni Chapel in Padua. It's also called the Arena Chapel or the Arena Chapel because it's actually built on the edge of the old Roman arena, the amphitheatre where gladiatorial combat would have happened. And this is a bit down here where that doorway is. That's a bit of the old Roman wall there. Originally, there was a palace to the left of it where that gap is, the palace of the Scrovegni family. This is their sort of out-of-town palace, which was destroyed in the 19th century. And it was commissioned by the man you see in the detail at the top left, a man called Enrico Scrovegni. It is usually assumed that he paid for it with money which he inherited from his father. His father was a notorious usurer. He lent money on interest, a sin in the eyes of God. He was so infamous that he was actually mentioned by Dante in hell in the Divine Comedy. But actually, that's not the case. Enrico Scrovegni had paid for an entire convent dedicated to St. Ursula, a little further out of Padua. But part of the agreement, part of his atonement for the sins of the father, was that he was never allowed to mention that. So this chapel was just a celebration of the money that he still had. And to be perfectly honest, some of his financial affairs were not entirely straight along the line. Now, if you were to go through that door on the west facade of the chapel, which you used to be able to do, but you go in through a side door now, and turned round and looked up behind you, this is what you would see, the Last Judgement. And that detail of the decoration, of the dedication of the chapel, is down here above the door. There's Enrico Scrovegni offering the chapel to the Virgin Mary, Saints Lawrence and Catherine, as it happens. And the Last Judgment, with Christ sitting, raising the blessed with his right hand and condemning the damned, there's a glorious scene of hell under his left, really governs the structure of the painting. Now, of the painting of the chapel, if you turn round now, and if you are some feet off the ground, this is what you would see, heading towards the high altar, 2 subsidiary altars dedicated to St. Lawrence and Catherine, and along the bottom, these fictive marble, trompe-l'oeil marble panels with imaginary carvings of the vices running along the left, along from hell, and the virtues down here running along from the blessed going up to heaven. And the stories which are told start up here at the back right when you're in this entrance, and they come round always in a clockwise direction, spiraling round the chapel. Now, I've only got time today to talk about the Passion of Christ, so I'm going to do the story so far, which I'll rush through very quickly. And if you don't know the particular episodes, I apologise. Maybe we'll have time to catch up on those another day. Because it starts at the top here with the stories of Joachim and Anna, who are the parents of the Virgin Mary, their inability to have a child, the annunciation that they will have a child, and they meet up at the Golden Gate here. You then go round past the Last Judgement to the North Wall, where it starts with the birth of the Virgin, the presentation at the temple, the plans for the betrothal of the Virgin, and here she's betrothed to Joseph, and she heads off back to her parents' house before the wedding itself, just in time for the Annunciation. It's a brilliant piece of planning by Giotto. It literally goes from there, journeying back to the house, to the Annunciation. We know that Jesus is coming. And then it drops down to the visitation, Mary going to visit her cousin Elizabeth, who's pregnant with John the Baptist. And it goes round the corner, and the story picks up again here with the nativity of Christ. So Jesus is born, the adoration of the kings, the presentation of the temple, the flight into Egypt and the massacre of the innocents. Go past the Last Judgement again, over to the opposite wall where we have Christ among the doctors at the age of 11, the baptism of Christ, his first miracle, the wedding at Cana, and the raising of Lazarus. And that's the story so far, because the next scene is this one, the entry into Jerusalem. Every single image in this chapel was conceived in some way by Giotto and painted by him and his workshop. He had a very large and very extensive workshop. At the top, he was there very much of the time, but as we get further down, he was working in other places. So he was sort of subcontracting to other workshops to come in and paint his designs and work out how to do things. That's quite complex. So let's just look at the stories. Here is Jesus on the donkey heading into Jerusalem. You can see the gate there. The people have come out to greet him. He's being followed by the apostles, led by St. Peter, who's looking, and he always does in this chapel, looking a little bit grumpy. He's got his left hand resting on the back of the donkey. The only other apostle I can definitely identify there is actually, well, that's John the Evangelist. I think this is St. Andrew, fairly sure of that. We'll see him again later on. And people are clambering up the trees and strewing their clothes on the ground in complete accord with the Bible. Mark 11, many spread their garments in the way, and others cut down branches off the trees and strawed them in the way. I won't be putting in a lot of Bible quotations because, again, not enough time to read the Bible and look at the pictures. And the pictures are there to tell us what the Bible says, really. Now, there aren't many strewing their garments, but then there isn't a lot of space for them. We have 3, and it's quite brilliant. It's like an animation of how you strew your garments in the way. First of all, you have to take your garment off. And I don't know if you've done this, but I do this sometimes when I've got a bit of a tight jumper and I can't get my arm out the sleeve. You cut to hold on to the cuff and you pull your elbow back from it. And that's what this man here is doing in the pink. He's holding on to the cuff with his right hand. He's pulled his arm back. So there's his arm and his elbow sort of jutting into what would be the armpit in a way. Then you have to pull the garment over your head, as this chap's doing. And then this one is strawing it in the way, as it says in Mark, in the King James Version, just in time for the donkey to step on it. But you can imagine them sort of bending down and doing this like an animation. Another thing I find fascinating here is that it's the men who've stepped way out of the city. The women are sort of staying close to the gate. And actually in other paintings, later than this even, you will see the women not daring to step outside the gate. On the whole, medieval and Renaissance women were kept at home. Sorry, ladies, not my fault. I wasn't there at the time. So he goes into Jerusalem, and the first thing he does is to expel the traders from the temple. Now look at the wording here. These titles are ones which modern art historians have decided. Usually you would think the expulsion of the money traders from the temple, but there's no money in this painting. And that was probably because although Enrico Scrovegni had atoned for the sins of his father with the convent of St. Ursula, he was still, well, he had a few dodgy dealings, and he didn't want to imply that money was in itself bad. And there are other examples around the chapel of how you can actually use your money well, perhaps. And one of them is for the glory of God, like this chapel. It's also for the glory of himself, of course, but let's leave that for the time being. Now, what we get therefore are the people who are selling animals, and Christ, of course, says this is supposed to be the house of God, but you've turned it into a den of thieves. He's being so unexpectedly violent that even the little children are cowering. This one next to Peter, who doesn't really know what to do. And this is a lovely detail. This apostle is reaching down and caring for this small child. Just that tiny glimpse of face there is really rather lovely. Now, this brings us to the end of one of the walls, which of course means that Giotto then has to go round the corner. And it's this corner that he goes round from the expulsion of the traders from the temple into this scene here. So let's put them next to each other. This is a scene which is out of order, really, in terms of the biblical narrative. This is the payment of Judas. You can see Judas in yellow, holding the 30 piece of silver in the money bag in his left hand, talking to one of the priests. A couple more of the priests going, oh, look at him, he's the one who's going to do it, and sort of indicating with his thumb. Not a terribly polite gesture, but then these are not terribly nice people. And we see the devil behind him with his horns, grasping him by the shoulders, leading him on. And one of the things I really love about this is that this ram with the horns is jumping. It's almost like he's jumping out of this painting, round the corner into this one. And it's almost as if he turns into the devil. This sense of continuing and taking you through. Because at every point in the story, and I'm just going to go back to demonstrate this because I didn't before, the action goes from left to right. He keeps you moving through. So the donkey going left up into the gate of Jerusalem, the action of Jesus going right to chase them out, and even here, the sense of Judas moving to the right. Now, we get to this point in the chapel. Notice how he's created this symmetry. Judas in yellow, the priest in red, Mary in red, and Anna in yellow. Now, Mary in red, that might seem unusual, but the actual dedication of the chapel is to Santa Maria della Carità, St. Mary of Charity. And the theological colour of charity is red. So she wears predominantly red in this painting. She's wearing exactly that same red here, and it's like she's come downstairs to meet her cousin Elizabeth. But the yellow for Anna and red for Mary echoes the red for the priest and the yellow for Judas. And you need to know where you are. Remember what's behind you, the Last Judgement, and remember that you will reverse the sides because you are turning around and looking behind you. But Mary and Anna are opposite the scenes of heaven here. And here is Mary again leading the blessed up to heaven, whereas Judas, receiving the 30 pieces of silver, is opposite the scenes of hell. And in fact, this is Judas hanging in hell, having committed suicide because of his guilt. Now, from the Annunciation, it dropped down to the Visitation. And so from here, what Giotto has to do is to drop down to this painting here for the Last Supper. Now, you may be very familiar with images of the Last Supper, and of course the Leonardo da Vinci is one of the most famous paintings in the world, and you would expect to see Jesus slap bang in the centre with the 12 apostles on either side of him, maybe Judas on our side of the table, not in the Leonardo. There's that joke that they said, well, you wanted a table for 26. Yes, but we're all going to sit on one side. Why did they do it like that? Well, because those images were in refectories, dining halls. This is not. They are in an upper room, cut away so we can see them. And rather gloriously, you can see their weight. You see the way their bottoms spread across the benches. And you see the shadows under the bench where their feet are. And Jesus is at the head of the table with John the Evangelist asleep on his chest, as is often depicted because it's implied in the Gospel of St. John that that is what happens. This is Judas, who has his hand in the table with a sort of black blur around his head. The other apostles have black halos. Now, Jesus has a gold leaf halo. Gold doesn't tarnish. Gold is completely inert, really, almost, in chemical terms. It's pure and unchanging, just like God, which is why it was used so often in Christian images. The halos of the apostles used silver leaf, and silver does tarnish, unfortunately. It's changed to black. Now, why use this odd form of the Last Supper here? Well, it's because of where the painting is placed. If you imagine it here, Jesus is sitting at the head of the table there, which is running. You could imagine him sitting behind this altar. So when he sort of hands out bread and wine, it is just like the priest turning from the high altar here to hand out the bread and wine during the Mass. And that's why the painting is orientated in that direction. It's followed by the washing of the feet. This confused me for a while because I thought, well, surely he would have done that before dinner. But the odd thing is, in the Gospel of St. John, it says after supper, he stepped down, took off his robe, girt himself around and took a basin and started to wash people's feet. Here he is, he's girt himself around and there's the basin. Now, curiously, John doesn't mention the institution of the Eucharist in the Passion series. All of that is in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John does talk about the Eucharistic symbolism way back a year before this happened, about the time of the miracle of the loaves and the fishes. It's in John chapter 6, as it happens. Anyway, so in John, this comes after supper. Nevertheless, Judas is still there, still with this odd black glow. It's as if some later person thinking, well, who's that person who hasn't got a halo? I better paint one in. It's just not supposed to be there. And again, Peter entirely grumpy. Again, this is a brilliant example in the New Testament of Peter's very human character. Jesus comes along and starts washing their feet, and Peter goes, no, you can't wash my feet. I should be washing your feet. And Jesus says, long story short, says, well, if I don't wash your feet, you will have no part in me. At which point Peter goes, well, yes, do my head and hands too. And Jesus is just sort of very patiently saying, look, I'm just doing the feet for now, if that's okay. But that sense of Peter pulling up his blue robe to reveal his leg, quite nicely toned calf muscle, I must say, putting his foot down tentatively in case the water isn't terribly warm, but still looking grumpy, not entirely clear on why this is happening. I think it's a really rather gorgeous detail. Good. Look, there is a detail there. And Giotto, if it was indeed Giotto who designed this, very probably, plays these little games. You see Jesus clasping the leg here, and you see the tips of the fingers, but you also see the tips of the toes of the apostle who's sitting behind there, which it's like a little game about what you can see and what you can't. It makes it a bit more realistic. Then you get the arrest of Christ. Judas comes up and betrays Jesus with a kiss. Like the apostles, the soldiers have silver leaf helmets, and they have all tarnished. Peter cuts off the ear of one of the soldiers, and Jesus then, one of the Gospels says, and one of the soldiers grabs the garment and he gets away. And you just see the garment here, just off screen almost, but one of the apostles looking around, and they won't be seen again. They just leave, and they're not seen again until after the resurrection, basically. Jesus is arrested and led away to the high priests. And I've just spent the past week trying to work out the precise order that this happens, and you have to jump amongst the Gospels. He goes to Annas, who was the father-in-law of the high priest Caiaphas, who then sent him off to Pilate. So, which is which? This is Annas in the red, because he's the father-in-law, and so he's got the longer beard. This is Caiaphas. He's the high priest, the son-in-law of Annas. He's got a shorter beard, which implies that he's younger. Also, at a certain point, Jesus says something, and Caiaphas says, this is blasphemy, and rends his clothing. The other thing that happens is that one of the soldiers says, how dare you say that to him, and strikes him. This is also happening on the left. It's after the Last Supper. It's at night time. They're in a room at night, and this is a torch in the background. Odd flames, I know, but this painting's hundreds of years old, lighting up the back wall. What next? Well, then he is mocked. But first, I want to draw a little parallel. Remember I mentioned the vices? Here is the vice of wrath, anger, rending her garments on the opposite wall. I'll show you precisely where later on. And see how Caiaphas's gesture ties into that sin of wrath, that vice in this case. Now there, he is mocked. There are two mockings as it happens. This is the first one where they beat him and then say, prophesy which of us hit you. But they slightly combined it with the crown of thorns and giving him a reed as a scepter. It's a slight combination of the two scenes. And he goes to Pilate, and Pilate says, tell me what he's done wrong. And you can see him gesturing in this sort of noble Roman red, whereas the priests are going, well, we don't like him very much. And Giotto very subtly gives this priest a crooked finger to imply he himself is crooked in some way. Now, this brings us to the end of that wall there. There's the arrest, the yellow of Judas, very clear. We get to this bit, and we have to go past the blessed, going up to heaven, and past hell to get to the next scene here, which is the road to Calvary. And it's important to know where it is, because he is effectively leading away from hell, because the road to Calvary is the road to our salvation. So we will be saved from hell because of these actions. The Virgin Mary reappears. She hasn't been seen in the sequence since the wedding at Cana. I have an awful nagging suspicion that I said the supper at Emmaus just now, but I think I said the wedding at Cana, his first miracle. And we see him carrying his own cross out of Jerusalem. I don't know if you recognize that gate. This is one of those things that Giotto does. Whether it's the same gate or not is not clear, but it's certainly the same type of gate. Jerusalem has all these gates all the way around it. The New Jerusalem, of course, will have 12 gates. Don't know about the old one. But he went into Jerusalem through that gate and out of the same type of gate to head to Calvary. So the next scene is the crucifixion. And notice, although the entry into Jerusalem, the road to Calvary are going left to right, the crucifixion stops. It is static. It is a moment to pause and think about what is happening here. The crucifixion on Golgotha, the place of the skull, and here is the skull at the bottom, underneath the base of the cross, on Calvary. And a long story, nowhere near enough time to go into, suggests that that is the skull of Adam himself, who, by some coincidence, was buried in exactly the same place that Jesus would be crucified. No, not coincidence, this is part of God's plan. More about that another day. Kneeling at the foot of the cross is Mary Magdalene, very often associated with Jesus' feet, and fainting through grief is the Virgin Mary, supported by John the Evangelist and one of the holy women. On the other side, now, on this side, we have the good people at Jesus' right hand. Remember that the blessed are raised up at Jesus' right hand and the damned condemned under his left. Well, the blessed here are the people with halos. The damned are the bad people, the soldiers, with one exception. They separated his clothes out, but there was no seam in one of them, his glorious red robe. And what's going on there? Well, let's have a look. First of all, this is another parallel to one of the vices, envy, and that grasping. Grasping the money bag in the left hand, the right hand reaches out to get more. Notice how this soldier is grasping the robe with his left hand in the same way, and his hand is reaching out with the knife in the other. And it's not clear what he's going to do. Very probably he's going, right, well, I want my bit of that, so I'm going to cut it in half so I get my bit. And the other man is going, no, we don't want to cut this. It's worth more as one whole piece, so maybe we'll draw lots for it. Now, these are the damned with one exception. And there's a chap here with a halo, and a gold halo at that, saying, no. And this is the centurion who said, truly, this man was the Son of God. Now, where is envy? Well, she's really not that far away. Look, This is the crucifixion. There's the man being envious, and this is envy down here. Now, Christ before Annas and Caiaphas is directly opposite this fresco. Actually, wrath is down over here. So, the death on the cross, followed by the lamentation over the dead Christ. This is not a scene from the Bible, but it feeds into ideas from the Bible, and lamentation, think of Michelangelo's Pietà, was a common feature. Again, a sort of pause for contemplation. Standing by are Joseph of Arimathea with the shroud, ready to put him in his tomb, and Nicodemus, who would bring precious ointments, and Mary, John the Evangelist, Mary Magdalene still at Christ's feet, and other holy women, and yet more women who have followed Jesus from Galilee, according to the Gospels. And this hill, notice how Jesus' head is on a line with this hill, which takes you up past John the Evangelist, way up to the top, and then through into the next story, which we'll get to in a moment. A quick flashback. One of the major influences on the imagery in this chapel was a devotional text, a popular devotional text, probably written by a Franciscan for a poor Clare, one of the Franciscan nuns, called The Meditations on the Life of Christ. And it invites the reader to imagine themselves as present, to imagine themselves as observers of the scenes, and to imagine the emotions of the Virgin Mary as she goes through this. And Giotto makes the most beautiful parallel here. Look at the mother caring for her baby on the left. And look at the mother caring for her little boy, because any of you who are parents will know, and actually quite a few of you who are children, which is all of you, will also sense that you never stop being the little boy or little girl of your parents. They will still try and look after you as much as they can. But when you get closer to them, Mary's body is at the same angle, her head is at the same angle. She reaches down with her left hand and round with her right in both. And in both, she has an attendant who is helping her to support Jesus. This clear echo from the emotion of awe at the birth of her baby to the expression of grief at his death is so eloquent, so profound, and so moving, I think. So the resurrection, the hill brings us down, and it touches Jesus again just where his hand reaches out. And Giotto combines scenes. The Marys go to the tomb, but the angels say, no, he has risen. And yet the soldiers are still there, still fast asleep. And the angel's going, no, he's risen, he's over there. In another of the Gospels, Mary goes to the tomb, said, no, he's risen, go away. And she goes out into the garden and sees the garden and says, where have you put my Lord? And as Jesus turns around, she recognizes that it's him, reaches out to him. And he says, no, you mustn't touch me. I haven't yet gone up to my Father. And that sense of his departure and saying, you have to stay away, this gap between them is such a big distance, but he's almost left. Notice how his elbow is already out of the frame of the painting. Moving beyond the resurrection even, so we've gone beyond the passion, the ascension of Christ, and he really does. Jesus has left the building, the ascension, they're all kneeling there, looking up. In case you hadn't noticed, the angels are floating above the ground, going, he's up there, and he actually heads out of the painting. So the end of Giotto's narrative, very, very nearly, is Pentecost. Notice how in the Ascension he echoes one of the virtues, or rather the virtue echoes him, hope, as in faith, hope, and charity. Hope here is odd. You think, well, if you're hoping for something, then you don't have faith. But no, this is hope as in expectation, the hope of the life of to come. Christian hope is the expectation of the life to come, very much like Jesus heading up to heaven. In fact, hope is reaching up towards the image of heaven in the Last Judgement, whereas Jesus is heading out behind the picture frame. He's just about to disappear. Which leaves us to this last scene of Pentecost, and the tongues of flame come down, and they can speak in tongues, and they can go out and preach. Again, we see their bottoms spreading across the benches. We see the shadows of their legs under the bench. But we're up again near the chancel arch. They are now in a position that they could step out from this enclosed building, and they could go to the altar, and they could hold Mass now, because they now know how to do it, because they've been inspired by the Holy Spirit. We've come to the end of the story there, but by no means the end of the wealth of the chapel, because it's so important to see how these paintings are arranged, not only horizontally, but also vertically. Let's look horizontally to start with. We have the crucifixion, the lamentation, and the noli me tangere, the please don't touch me, as Jesus says. And I want you to look at Mary Magdalene kneeling at the foot of the cross, seated at Christ's feet, and then kneeling at his feet there. Now, just to emphasize the point, I'm going to pick out details. Often shown at Christ's feet. There are all sorts of reasons for this. Again, another day. Her hair is free, which is not respectable. Throughout church history, until 1969, she was associated with the sinner in Luke's Gospel, chapter 7. Her hair being uncovered tells us she is not respectable. That sinner, I will go into it, that sinner washed Christ's feet with precious ointment, with her hair and with her tears. And Mary Magdalene was associated with hair and ointment and tears ever afterwards. It was actually in 591 that Pope Gregory the Great said, no, she and Mary Magdalene are one and the same person. So from 591 to 1969, Mary Magdalene was seen as a repentant sinner, or, and to put it another way, a repentant prostitute. Here she is, her cloak round her knees with her hair flowing. Look at her at the lamentation. Her hair is dressed and the cloak has been pulled up to her waist. And after the resurrection, she is fully repentant. The cloak completely covers her head and her hair. And it's one of the most beautiful, poetic, one of the most eloquent representations of repentance that I know in art. But also let's look at Jesus' story that runs through this, held up as a display at the crucifixion, brought low through death. We follow the line up the hill and down again. There is a little decorative panel in between them, but it still follows that way till he's standing up at the noli me tangere on the right, the hill taking us round. But then in the next one, we get to the Ascension. So lying down, standing up in the air, you get this sense of the drama. It's like a picture board for a movie almost. That's how we would see it nowadays. This sense of movement through the space to tell us where we are in Jesus's story. But it's not just the horizontal, as I say, it's the vertical as well, looking at where things are on the walls. For example, the baptism is above the crucifixion. And here we see another one of these iconic scenes, Jesus in the center, no real movement, although he is looking to our right. He is naked in the river. It's important for us to know he is a man like any other man, as well as being God. He has two natures. God the Father looks down. The Holy Spirit sadly hasn't survived terribly well, but we get the Holy Trinity here. And the two angels stand on the bank holding his red robe and his blue cloak for him to wear later. And here is St. Andrew. I said we'd find him later on standing beside the River Galilee next to John the Baptist. Now look what happens. He pours the water down Jesus, and it comes down the painting, and then his side was pierced with a sword, and blood and water flowed mingled down. The water keeps flowing down, the blood of redemption and the water of life flowing down to forgive Mary Magdalene. But look what happens to his blue cloak, coming straight down, and there is Mary hanging not from the arms of an angel, but between the Holy Woman and John. What happens to the red robe? Well, you could see it as falling down right down to Mary Magdalene's knees, but of course this red robe is the very red robe which they're arguing over at the bottom of the painting here. So there is this continuity, the washing clean of baptism to free us of original sin, and the sacrifice of death and the triumph of death to follow to free us from personal sins that we may have committed later and to allow our salvation. This is actually this is a great image. This is why I had it in the church book, because it says so many things. You can see the hill which takes you from death to resurrection here. But this hill, notice how this hill continues continues up in this direction, up that hill, which is the hill in which Lazarus was buried. Look, the raising of Lazarus is above the resurrection of Christ. That's not a coincidence. In these little scenes, these are all referring to the painting to the right. This is the creation of Adam. God gave Adam life. Jesus gives mankind new life, and he proves it through his resurrection. But up here, this is a scene from the life of the Virgin Mary. They're waiting for a sign to see who should marry the Virgin Mary, and one of the priests is waiting there, kneeling in a red robe. And directly beneath him, kneeling in a red robe, is Mary Magdalene, kneeling in her repentant red garment here. It's just breathtaking to think how he planned this chapel as a whole. And one last image, I love this idea. The Ascension of Christ could almost have him going back into the gates of Jerusalem. And of course, that's what he's going to do. He's going to end up eventually in the heavenly Jerusalem. Before we get there, though, the Last Supper and Pentecost are both at the ends of walls. The Last Supper at the beginning of Holy Week, Pentecost after the resurrection and ascension. They are opposite each other on the walls near the chancel. And it is almost as if the apostles have gained a promotion, because at the Last Supper they had silver halos. Now look, they all have golden halos. I love this detail. This is how the Passion unfolds in Giotto's glorious chapel. There are many other stories to look at, probably as many, again, a few more than we've looked at. There are examples, I talked about them all in my blog over lockdown last year. You might be able to find them, it's a bit tricky. So we've had all our time in the chapel for today. We have to turn round and pretend we're going out of the door at the West End, which I would dearly love to, for the Last Judgement. Just remember that as you go out into the world. Do good, it says, or you'll end up in hell, because it's the end of the world, basically. I know for now it's only the end of the lecture, but at the very top, you can see angels preparing to fold up the world as we know it. They're literally rolling up the sky with the sun and the moon. And behind this revelation, we see the heavenly Jerusalem. So the next time you go, make sure you book in advance. You only get 20 minutes. So if you can, try and book 2 slots next to each other, and they should let you stay in for a full 40 minutes, because it's a real rush. Any questions, George?
Well, firstly, Richard, thank you so much. I'm just going to stop screen sharing there, but we're about to go into question time, everyone. So now is your chance, everyone. If you'd like to ask Richard some questions, please do comment away. But as I said, Richard, thank you so much. It's been a joy to hear you giving us that presentation. The comments have been wonderful. I know last year I was telling you, I was hoping to go to Padua last year and Ravenna last year as well, and those trips were cancelled. And I don't think if it, and looking at some of the comments there, I don't think actually if I was in the chapel, I would have been able to put some of the symbolism together and sort of picture how things. So thank you so much. And I know a lot of people watching have really appreciated how you've been able to explain it. So we're going into question time, everyone. So I'm going to jump straight in with some of the questions that have been coming in. So you talked at the start, Richard, that Giotto had quite a large workshop and he had almost subcontracted some of the work out. So someone's asked a question here: to what extent can we talk about a school of Giotto with subcontractors following the same style set by the master?
Oh, it's very much the case. The school of Giotto is very extensive. And some people worked with him for, I think Taddeo Gaddi is around 30 years as one of his assistants. And it's only after Giotto's death that he gets to have his own workshop and paint his own paintings, to be perfectly honest. There's a very big one in Santa Croce in Florence. If you go down towards the high altar, look to your right, there's a Giotto altarpiece there, the Coronation of the Virgin, but all of the frescoes are by Taddeo Gaddi. And, he learnt it all working for Giotto. And they must have been given a large amount of autonomy. It seems very likely that all of the images were planned by Giotto in advance for all of that correlation to work out. And it may be even that he did full scale drawings or even watercolor painting, like quick paintings anyway, for people to follow. Although there were adaptations, because Scroveny wanted the chapel enlarged, and then the nearby monastery said, he can't do that, it's just a family chapel, that would be showing off, and people would go there and not come to us. So it wasn't enlarged, but they changed some of the frescoes around, actually. So the Last Supper might not be probably isn't where Giotto originally intended it. And he might not have designed it to look quite like that. So one of the workshop may have adapted it for him, because he may have been back in a CC painting there by that stage. But yes, in the top, when they start out, it's very coherent, the style. And there's a sense that they put one scaffolding up and Giotto was sort of scurrying around going, yeah, do it like that, I'll do this bit. As you get down and it gets closer to the dedication, there's a sense that they start to rush it. There's a really, really good book about this by a woman called Laura Jacobus. Unfortunately, it's out of print and very expensive secondhand. But I know Laura is she's doing a rewrite and it will be published again. And she's very good at talking about exactly how it all fits together. Not quite in the same way in terms of meaning, but how it was painted and the way it functioned as a religious space as well.
Thank you, Richard. And you've answered a couple of questions in there. So the next question is, in the painting in the panel of the Last Supper, are there any historical indicators about the names of possible models? Are any of the apostles, for example, known local dignitaries?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I don't think there's any suspicion that, apart from Enrico Scroveny himself in the dedication scene at the bottom of the Last Judgement, and possibly the man holding the chapel, who might have been the first chaplain or whatever they had there, that has been suggested. Are portraits. All of the others they're sort of stock Giotto or Giottesque characters. And in fact, you can map, and I think Laura did, you can map the way in which the cartoons get used and repeated. There are set types and you can work out set hands of artists who did them, although we don't know those artists' names.
Thanks, Richard. And we saw when you were going through sort of, when you were depicting Mary on certain sides of paintings and the colours she was in, is there a running theme throughout paintings that good is generally depicted on the right with bad on the left?
Well, in scenes like the Last Judgement, yes, the good are at Jesus's right hand and the bad at his left. So when we're looking at the painting, the bad is on our right and the good on the left. It doesn't always follow, to be perfectly honest, because at the Last Supper, Judas is actually at Jesus's right hand and he is on the left of the painting as well. So it doesn't always follow through that way, to be honest. The movement goes from left to right, unless it's one of those static contemplative scenes.
Thanks, Richard. And this is more of a theological question, but it's quite an interesting point that's come in. But perhaps Christ's side was pierced as an act of mercy. Crucifixion was supposed to last days and be incredibly agonizing. Roman soldiers drank vinegar as part of their rations. So there's an idea that vinegar was maybe good for you. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Pinning things down like that historically is quite hard to tell, because they, theoretically, I'm not a theologian. I'm an art historian, so I can speak to why artists put those details in, but I don't know the historical archaeological reasons why it was done necessarily. Nevertheless, yes, the piercing of the side with the spear may have been to hasten his death. Certainly, they talk about the fact that they need to get these three, Jesus and the two thieves, who Giotto doesn't paint, not enough time for him. They need to get them down because it's Friday and the next day, Saturday, is the Sabbath, and the Jews won't be able to do anything after sundown, so they want to hasten the deaths. So they break the shins of the thieves, but Jesus is already dead by that point. Now, what it says in the Bible is, yes, that his side is pierced with a spear and blood and water flowed mingled down. And then all sorts of stories follow from that. The interpretation of the blood and the water. So the wine, his sacrifice, the water of life, yes. But also, some people say that the centurion who said, truly this is the Son of God, was also the man who pierced him with a spear. And later on, he becomes known as a man called Longinus, from the Greek word for lance. And he takes a relic of the Holy Blood, and according to the Mantuans in Italy, he gets all the way there and leaves a relic of the Holy Blood there. He converts to Christianity and is canonized sometime in the 8th or 9th century, I think. So whatever the historical reasons for it, what becomes almost more important for the art is the symbolism of it, I think.
And on that idea about symbolism, someone's asked a question about, is there any specific symbolism depicted in the flag that Jesus is holding in the Noli Me Tangere depiction?
Yes. I was once asked I was talking in a chapel which remained nameless, which has a rather wonderful painting of the resurrection, and Jesus is holding this flag. And the chaplain of this particular chapel said, Richard, why is it? I was just wondering, why is it that Jesus is so often shown as being English? And I just thought, are you a chaplain of the Church of England? Did you have any training for this job, I wonder? Because it's the flag of Christ triumphant, the red of his suffering, his blood in a cross shape, on the white of his purity and innocence. And in fact, he carries this flag most often at the crucifixion. It is the flag of Jesus. So it became the flag of people fighting for Jesus, the Crusaders, who adopted St. George, a soldier, a Christian soldier. So it became the flag of St. George, who became at some point in the 1340s the patron saint of England. So it became the English flag. But Jesus was not specifically English, no.
Thanks, Richard. And I know everyone watching this will know last year in some of our lectures, we've talked about patron saints. And before St. George was patron saint, it was St. Edmund from my hometown in Bury St. Edmunds who was patron saint of England. And it was the flag of St. Edmund that was carried into the Battle of Agincourt, not the flag of St. George. So we'll try and get you a lecture on St. Edmund because he's really cool. Someone's asked here quite an interesting question, I think, is that, was the Golden Legend used at all in narrative scenes of the chapel?
Yes. Almost certainly, because there are elaborations, but not just the Golden Legend. The Golden Legend, for those of you who don't know, was a collection of stories of the lives of the saints, written down by a man called Jacopo da Voragine, and put together in the 1260s and 70s. He went on to become the Bishop of Genoa. And it was the go-to book for artists about the lives of the saints. That's what people knew about it. And as well as the lives of the saints, various feast days. So the story of Joachim and Anna, who, of course, Mary's parents are not in the Bible, is in the Golden Legend. So yes, it was hugely important. But also the sources for the Golden Legend. The apocryphal accounts of Christ's life and Mary's origins, the proto-evangelium is very important, the pseudo-gospel of St. James, it's sometimes called. For example, the flight into Egypt, you've got Joseph leading the donkey with Mary sitting on it, but then there's a girl and 3 boys. You think, well, what are they doing? Who are they? And when you read the proto-evangelium, you say, and Mary was traveling with 1 girl and Joseph with 3 boys. Oh, that's where he got it from. What he doesn't do, which is a real pity, is because it then goes on to say, and they came to this cave and a dragon came out. And Jesus got off the donkey and went up and blessed the dragon and told it to go away, which was remarkable because, let's face it, he was only about 12 days old at this stage. There are paintings of that.
Thank you, Richard. And I think this is quite interesting again. And there's been some really great questions coming in. But how does Giotto distinguish himself, do you think, from earlier Italian artists in his depiction of the Passion scenes?
Well, it's a very good question. And to be perfectly honest, it's quite hard to answer, because the fact that these frescoes survive at all is quite miraculous. Let's face it, 1303 to 1305 they were painted, and we're 700 years later, and they're still there. And they're still in surprisingly good condition, given that age, and given that they're painted on plaster very close to a river. So a lot of the works of his contemporaries haven't survived. But if you look over to Siena, to Duccio, or to the man who may well have taught them both, Cimabue, it's a very different style of painting. Giotto seems to have more of a view, and this may well relate to the Franciscan influence on what's going on here. This and probably whatever priest it was that advised on what scenes should be represented wasn't Giotto's choice. He chose how to show them, but he would have been advised what scenes to include. But that stresses Christ's humanity because we can associate with the humanity. So things that we recognize, we will empathize with more and we'll be drawn into the story more. So everything becomes more human. That sense of the bottom spreading on the bench, it's so real. And it's almost, I find it's fun. Things like that, to notice at the Last Supper that they're sitting on this rather hard bench as it happens. So it is that he didn't know about single vanishing point perspective, but he was very good at giving a sense of space anyway. You could imagine it taking place, and that's what it is. The humanity of his work is really what's different. Now, there were a couple of other artists who were reaching in that direction. There must have been, or Giotto wouldn't have done it all on his own. A man called Pietro Cavallini, for example. But they're not as well known, partly because their work just doesn't survive very well.
And we're just going to jump back to the flag quickly, because I've just had a correction come in, but I know that the flag is Christ triumphant. They want to know, is there writing on the flag?
You're right. There is. I've still got that on my screen at the moment, and there is writing on it. And I just look at that and thought, oh yes, look, there's writing on it. I really should find out if we know what that says. I'm so sorry, I don't know.
Thanks, Richard. And going to it's as you said, it's incredible that these paintings have survived so long and they're in such great condition. Someone's asked, what was the paint base? Was it an egg-based stucco method? And has much conservation work been done on the building?
Yes, yes, a lot. I mean, there have been all sorts of problems with it, partly because the palace next door, it wasn't completely abutting. There's a sort of courtyard in between, but that was altered. There was access to a first story from the palace, but when that was knocked down and there was a portico at the front that was taken off, and that caused water to seep in. And actually in the 19th century, they were in a really, like so many English churches, all the stuff that Giles Gilbert Scott was doing to remodel them and hold them together. Ely Cathedral didn't have a roof, things like that, or had bits of the roof missing anyway. That happened too. So they were put back together, and the building itself has been conserved often. And the frescoes too have been conserved. The last campaign ended about 16, 17 years ago, which was when they put this airlock on the outside, and you enter quite close to the chancel now. So yes, as for technique, no, it's true fresco, buon fresco. Didn't have enough time to talk about the whole technique, but with true fresco, you put the plaster on the wall, and you paint, and you suspend the pigment in lime water, and you paint it on, and this causes the pigment and the medium, the paint binds with the drying plaster, so it becomes part of the wall, which is what makes it so durable. However, once the plaster is dry, you can then paint a secco on the dry plaster. Now that is not bonded as well to the wall, and that has worn off quite often. You see it a lot with the blue robes. This is why a lot of Mary's blue cloaks look a bit ropey at the moment, why Peter looks oddly pale, his clothes, because you can't mix ultramarine, the most expensive blue, with lime water. You can, and in fact, even I think azurite, the cheaper blue, doesn't work well on fresco. So that tends to be painted a secco, so on the dry plaster afterwards, and it flakes off. And the sort of, you could paint it back, but you're not Giotto, so nobody would even dream of doing that. Not
That's
these days.
fascinating. Thank you, Richard. I think we've got time for maybe 2 quick questions. So Dante refers to Giotto's work with praise. Basorielli in Purgatorio. Would Dante have seen the Scrovegni Chapel? And do we know if he knew Giotto personally?
Well, the answer is we do not know. But Dante sees Scrovegni's father in hell. He sees all of the usurers, and they have their money bags tied around their necks. The idea being that they know it's there, but their hands are tied behind their backs. So they're trying to see their money and they can't see it anymore. But he sees someone with a blue bag with a pig on it, and that was the Scrovegni coat of arms. And so Dad was there, and Dante knew about Dad. Dante was also in exile at this point. What he says is, and it's really interesting what he says about Giotto, because I do think people misinterpret it. He meets a poet whose voice he recognizes in hell, and he said, "What are you doing here? You're a poet." And this poet looks up and says, "Yeah, well, you're a poet too, aren't you? But it won't last." I mean, everybody used to talk about Cimabue, but now Giotto is all the rage. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. And it's not actually, he's not saying that Giotto's good. He's actually saying that Giotto is fashionable. And what he's saying is fame is transient. It won't last, Dante. Your fame won't last. Now, there's so many ironies there. One of the ironies is that we're still talking about Dante today. I have no idea who that other poet is. I could look it up. The other thing is, he says, Giotto's all the rage. Cimabue is gone. Nowadays, who started the history of Western European painting? Cimabue and Giotto. Why do we think of those two people? Well, because they were mentioned by Dante as much as anything. So it's a really interesting quotation. There is every possibility that Dante was present at the consecration of the chapel on the Feast of the Annunciation, Lady Day, 25th of March, 1305, but we have no evidence.
Thank you, Richard. And I think a really nice question, and possibly quite a tough question to finish on, is that do you have a favourite panel in the chapel and why?
Do I have a favourite panel? Oh, the thing is, it works so well as a whole. Is the one I was thinking as I was going through, this is probably my favourite, but then I probably thought that about 10 times as we were going through. I'm just running through them in my head again. Do you know what? My favourite detail, you'll have to look this up. My favourite detail is on the right wall as you go in, the top right, the last scene from the story of Joachim and Anna, which is the kiss, the greeting at the Golden Gate. Anna and Joachim kiss each other, and the love between this old couple is so beautiful because he puts his hand so carefully around her hair and she just runs her fingers through his beard. And they do that lovely kiss and they get a sort of nose bump thing and go slightly cross-eyed as they do it. It's absolutely gorgeous. Do look that up.
Thank you, Richard. And everyone, thank you so much for your questions today. And again, thank you, Richard, for taking the time to talk to us. So as we said at the start of this section, some really exciting announcements. So we're going to be moving upgrading our platform very shortly onto a new platform that will make joining easier. It will give you a much better experience and it will allow people to watch also live on YouTube. So that's one of our announcements. Also, we've got the member exclusive lectures launching in May. So we're going to post a link very shortly to member exclusive lectures. But as I said, please don't worry, everyone. The Thursday lunchtime lectures are continuing. They're not being cancelled and they are remaining free of charge. It's just a benefit that we're giving to people who become members with us. And if you do become a member of us from today, you will get a free copy of Richard's book, which, as I said at the start, it's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's if you join us by direct debit from just £3.50 a month, and if you use the offer code lecture and just put lecture in capitals at the checkout, it gives you an offer code option. You'll get a free copy of this. But if you'd like to donate in other ways, you can do so through our website, which is visitchurch.org.uk, or you can send a text donation by texting CCT to 70331, and that will give us a gift of £3. Now, if you've got ideas for future lectures, please do comment away. I've seen there's been some coming already. I've seen a very interesting one about the painted churches of Romania, and I think that's a great idea. And I know that's featured in here as well, painted churches of Romania. I had a quick look at them earlier. So yeah, please do, everyone, keep your ideas and suggestions coming in. Now, next week, we are going to be joined by Professor Nigel Saul, who's going to be talking to us about his new book. It came out late last year called Decorating Glory, Church Building in Herefordshire in the 14th Century. This is the book. You can buy it on our website, but as I said, that's next week's talk, so you can join us same time next week. But if you've got questions, anyone, as always, just send us a direct message, comment away. I keep an eye on the feed. But once again, thank you for joining us, everyone, and thank you so much again to Richard for taking time to talk to us today. It's been fascinating. We really do appreciate it.